You know, I had a bit of a flashback the other day. I was thinking about 10th grade English class.
Oh, no.
Specifically, that moment when the teacher turns to the chalkboard and starts drawing one of those massive, sprawling sentence diagrams. You remember these?
Oh, absolutely. The
The
trees.
trees. Branches going everywhere, little triangles, labels like noun phrase, verb phrase, prepositional phrase.
Right.
And then there were the rules. Don't dangle this. You can't put that adjective there. This has to agree with that. It felt less like learning a natural human instinct and more like memorizing a tax code.
It feels arbitrary, like a board game where the designer just made up a bunch of complex rules to make it difficult on purpose.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
felt like a chaotic mess of scaffolding. But what if I told you, or rather, what if you told me, since you're the one who brought this research to the table, that our brains actually hate that kind of arbitrary complexity?
Uh,
What if the system underneath all that noise is actually incredibly simple? Maybe even perfect.
Perfect is a very heavy word in science, but that is exactly the road we are going down today.
Okay.
We are doing a deep dive into a text called Minimalist Foundations of Bare Phrase Structure.
Which I have to say is a mouthful of a title.
It is. It's a dense, heavy-hitting piece of linguistic theory. But the mission behind it is fascinating. We are essentially asking, what if language isn't a messy rulebook? What if it is an optimal solution to a biological problem?
An optimal solution, so we're talking about efficiency.
We are. The text chronicles this massive shift in the field of linguistics. We're moving away from the dominant theories of the 1960s and 70s, specifically something called X-bar theory,
Wow.
and moving towards something stripped down, something they call bare phrase structure.
Bare meaning naked. No bells and whistles.
Precisely. And the core argument rests on a concept the text calls virtual conceptual necessity.
I highlighted that phrase 3 times because it sounds important, but it also sounds like something a philosopher would say to get out of paying a bar tab.
Yeah.
Virtual conceptual necessity. What does that actually mean in plain English?
It's actually a beautiful concept. Think of a soap bubble.
Okay.
When you blow a bubble, it always forms a sphere. It doesn't do that because there is a rule book somewhere that says thou shalt be round. It does it because, physically, a sphere is the most efficient shape to minimize surface tension. It has to be that shape.
Okay, I follow. It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. The text argues that human language is like that bubble. It isn't the way it is because of random cultural rules. It's the way it is because it has to satisfy certain conditions of the brain. It's a structurally perfect submission to a specific engineering problem.
Okay, that is a big claim. To understand the perfect version, though, I feel like we need to understand the imperfect version. The source spends a lot of time tearing down this X-bar theory.
It does.
I know this was the gold standard for a long time. What was the problem with it? Why did we need to, blow up the building?
To understand the flaw in X-bar theory, you have to look at how linguists viewed the machinery of the brain back then. They saw two distinct components. First, you have the lexicon.
Okay, so that's your mental dictionary. That's where I keep cat, run, sandwich.
Right. And inside that dictionary, you have information. So if you look up the word devour, your brain knows it's a verb, and it knows it needs a target. You have to devour something.
Right.
You can't just walk into a room and say, I devoured. People will wait for the rest of the sentence.
Right. I devour the pizza.
Exactly. So the word itself has requirements. But X-bar theory added a second, completely separate component, the phrase structure rules.
Mm-hmm.
This was like a separate instruction manual that said to build a verb phrase, you must take a verb and add a noun phrase.
Wait, I see the redundancy. The word devour already knows it needs a noun. Why do I need a separate rule book to tell me to add a noun?
That is exactly the critique. It's double dipping. You are encoding the same information in two different places.
Right.
In a minimalist system, in a perfect system, you shouldn't need a separate rule book. The properties of the words themselves should be enough to build the structure.
So X-bar theory was basically a bureaucracy. It had a whole department dedicated to enforcing rules that the workers already knew how to follow.
That is a great way to put it. And the text argues that we need to fire that department. And this brings us to the interface concept. The authors view the language faculty, the computer in our heads, which they call CH-ELEVA, as a middleman.
A middleman between what?
Between two other systems in the body. On one side, you have the sensoromotor system. That's your mouth, your ears, the physical act of speech or sign, the phonology.
Okay. The output, the stuff we hear.
On the other side, you have the conceptual intentional system. That's the mind, thought, meaning the logical form.
So the language computer sits between the mouth and the mind.
Correct. And here's the minimalist argument. This computer should only contain things that are readable by the mouth or the mind. If you have a piece of theoretical scaffolding, like a bar level, or an intermediate node on a tree diagram, and it doesn't have a sound, and it doesn't add any meaning, why is it there?
It's like code bloat in software. If the user can't see it, the database doesn't need it, delete it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
X-bar theory was full of these invisible levels. They helped linguists draw tidy trees, but the text argues they don't actually exist in the brain because they aren't virtually conceptually necessary. They are just noise.
Okay, I'm with you on the philosophy. Streamline the system, burn the rule book. But I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
If I don't have the rules, how do I actually build a sentence? I can't just dump a bucket of words on the floor and hope they organize themselves. Apple eat I doesn't work.
This is where we get to the engine of the whole system. If we take away the complex rules, what is left?
Yeah.
The text says we are left with one single, incredibly simple operation. It's called merge.
Merge. That sounds almost too simple.
It is deceptively simple. The definition in the text is just this. Take two objects, let's call them alpha, and beta, put them together, now you have a set. Alpha, beta. That's it.
That's the whole mechanism. I take eat and I take apples and I just stick them together.
That is the core mechanism. But here is the problem, and the source goes into this in detail because this is where it gets tricky.
Okay.
If I take eat and apples and I merge them, I get a pair, but my brain needs to know what that pair is.
Right. Is the new thing a noun? Is it a verb? If I'm building a sentence, I need to know what kind of block I just made so I can fit it into the next slot.
Exactly. This is the labeling dilemma. When you mix red paint and blue paint, you get purple paint. Physics decides for you. But language isn't paint. We need a label.
Right.
The text walks through the logical possibilities for how the brain decides what to call this new pair.
I remember reading this section. It felt a bit like set theory math. They talked about intersection and union.
It is set theory. So let's look at option 1, intersection. You look for features that eat and apples share, and that becomes the label.
Well, let's see. Eat is an action. Apples is a fruit. What do they share?
Basically nothing. They are both words.
Right. So the intersection is a null set. It's empty. That doesn't help the brain label the phrase.
So intersection is out.
Okay, what about union? Just mash all their features together.
That creates a monster. Eat says, I am a verb. Apples says, I am a noun. If you do a union, the resulting object tries to be both a noun and a verb simultaneously.
Which is a contradiction. You can't be a person and a place at the same time. The system crashes.
Precisely. So logic dictates there is only one option left. One of the two items must project.
Project, that means taking the lead.
Yes. One of them becomes the boss. One is the head. If you merge a verb and a noun, the verb is almost always the selector. Eat demands an object, so eat projects its identity onto the whole phrase.
So the phrase eat apples acts like a verb. Okay, that makes sense. We have a hierarchy. But then the text threw me a curveball. Just when I thought I understood the system, they started talking about Martians.
Yes, the Martian thought experiment.
I honestly wasn't expecting aliens in a syntax paper. What point were they trying to make there? Because it seemed to come out of nowhere.
They were making a distinction between what is logically possible and what is biologically true for humans.
Okay.
The text argues that determining the label immediately as soon as you merge the words isn't the only way to do it.
How else would you do it?
Well, a Martian language might merge eat and apples, leave it unlabeled, just a mystery bag, and then figure out what it is later, maybe at the end of the sentence. Logically, that's possible.
Well, they don't do that.
No. The human system is derivational. We build step by step, and we label as we go. The text argues this is the most efficient way for our specific interface conditions. We don't look ahead, we just build.
Okay, so we're building this tree, labeling as we go, using this merge tool. This brings us to a part of the text that I found really tricky, but I think it's crucial. The definitions of phrases and heads.
Right.
In the old days, in X-bar theory, these were rigid categories, right? You were born a noun phrase.
Correct. In X-bar theory, being a maximal projection, which is just fancy talk for a full phrase, or a head, the single word, was like a permanent status. You had a name tag, hello, I am a noun phrase.
But the bear theory says these are relational.
Yes. This is a huge shift. There are no tags. There are no stickers. Whether you are a phrase or a head depends entirely on your context, who you are merging with right now.
Can we use the example from the text? They use the book.
Sure, the book.
Yeah.
In the old way, to draw this, you needed a complex structure. You'd have a slot for the determiner
Yeah.
and a slot for the noun book.
Uh-huh.
But to make the tree look correct according to the rules, you'd also draw empty branches above them, the dollar plus, or dollars plus, or dollar plus dollars, just to satisfy the geometry.
Like reserving empty seats at a dinner table for guests who aren't coming, just because the table has to be full.
Right. But in bare phrase structure, we ask, is that necessary? No. You have book, you merge them. The projects, that's it.
So where does the relational part come in?
Look at the word book. In the phrase the book doesn't merge with anything else inside that unit. It stops there. So simply because it doesn't go any further, it is a maximal projection.
It is a phrase.
It is. But what if I changed the sentence? What if I said the thick book?
Oh, okay.
Now look what happens. Book has to merge with thick first. So book is no longer the top of its own little hill. It's buried inside a larger structure, so its status changes.
Nice.
It's no longer a maximal projection in the same way. The label phrase isn't a property of the word book. It's a description of where book is sitting right now.
That's interesting. So in the old way, book was always a phrase candidate.
Mm-hmm.
In the new way, it's like, think of a startup versus a corporation. In a big corporation, you have a title. Senior Vice President. That's your title, no matter what room you're in. That's X-bar theory.
Right.
In a startup, you're just the guy doing the coding right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you walk into a sales meeting, maybe you're the technical advisor. Your role is defined by what you're doing and who you're with, not a badge you wear.
That works perfectly, and it strips away all those empty branches in the tree. If you don't need them, they don't exist.
Now, I want to get into the weeds for a second because the text distinguishes between two flavors of combining things.
Okay.
We've talked about substitution, but then there is adjunction.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the text got very dense here. It started talking about two-segment categories. I felt my eyes glazing over. Help me out here.
It sounds technical, but the distinction is actually very intuitive. Think of it like building a house.
Okay, I'm building a house.
Substitution is the main construction. You pour the foundation, you put up the walls, you put on the roof. You are creating the core structure of the building.
Got it.
When you merge eat and apples, you are building the core meaning of the sentence.
Structural integrity.
Adjunction is different. Adjunction is like painting the wall blue, or maybe tacking a poster onto the wall. You aren't changing the structural blueprint of the house. You're just adding information to something that is already there.
Okay, so in language, this would be like adding an adjective. Eat green apples.
Exactly. Green is an adjunct. Now here is where the theory gets clever. The text argues that the labeling has to be different for these two things.
Mm-hmm.
When you do the core building, substitution, you create a new category. But when you do adjunction, when you paint the wall, you create a two-segment category.
A two-segment category. Explain that using the house.
Well, if I paint the wall blue, do I have a new building? Do I call it a wall paint complex?
No, it's still just the wall.
Exactly. It's still the wall, but now the category wall has been stretched. It has two segments, the wall itself and the wall plus paint. But the label remains wall.
So the label hasn't changed. The boundaries have just gotten a little fuzzy.
Precisely. The text uses a notation langle H wrangle, to show this. It's the same label, just repeated. This allows the brain to distinguish between essential parts, the wall, and optional decorations, the paint.
And again, we didn't need a rule book.
The geometry of how we combine them told us.
Okay, I'm following the logic. It's elegant. But I have to be the skeptic again.
Sure.
This sounds like beautiful philosophy. It's neat and tidy, but language is messy. Real people mumble. They restart sentences. They use slang. Does this bare phrase structure actually solve any real-world linguistic problems that the old theory couldn't? Or is it just a prettier theory?
That is the ultimate test. A theory is useless if it doesn't explain the data. And the text brings out its heavy hitter here, the clitic.
Clitics. I remember these from French class. These are those tiny grammatical words, right? Like, je t'aime.
Yeah.
The T is a clitic.
Right. Or in Spanish, lo veo. I see it. They're curious little things. And for X-bar theory, they were a nightmare. They were a walking paradox.
Why? What's so scary about a tiny syllable?
It's about movement. Let's walk through a sentence. I see it. In many languages, that it starts its life acting like a full object. It's a noun phrase. It implies a whole concept.
Okay, so in the diagram, it starts big. It's a phrase, a maximal projection.
Correct. But in Romance languages, it moves. It flies across the sentence and physically attaches itself to the verb. It becomes part of the verb word itself.
Prefix or a suffix?
Exactly. At that point, it's acting like a head, a tiny word fragment.
So it starts as a phrase, XP, and ends up as a head, Sex arsehole.
And in the old theory, that was illegal.
Illegal.
Remember the name tags? You were either a phrase or a head. You couldn't be both. X-bar theory said error does not compute. The theory predicted that clitics shouldn't exist. But people use them every day.
So the map didn't match the territory. The theory was too rigid to handle the reality of how language moves.
Exactly. But look at what happens with our new relational definitions in bare phrase structure.
Because we got rid of the name tags.
Right. In its starting position, the clitic doesn't merge with anything else. It stands alone. So, by definition, it is a maximal projection. It is a phrase.
Check. It's allowed to be a phrase because it's alone.
Then it moves. It merges directly with the verb. It becomes a subpart of that verb. So now, by definition, it is a head.
It's not a contradiction anymore. It's just a change of address.
Exactly. Because phrase and head aren't permanent identities, the paradox evaporates. The bare phrase structure theory explains this behavior effortlessly, while the old theory choked on it.
That is actually a really compelling argument. It shows that by making the theory simpler, by removing the rules, you actually make it more powerful. You can explain more with less.
That is the definition of a good scientific theory. You want to cover the most empirical ground with the fewest assumptions.
So let's zoom out as we wrap this up. We started with my high school trauma, the feeling that grammar was just a list of arbitrary do's and don'ts. Where do we land after reading this?
We land in a very different place. The text concludes that if you strip away the noise, the architecture of human language suggests it might be perfect.
That word again. Perfect.
It means that the system is optimally designed to link sound and meaning. It doesn't have any extra baggage, doesn't have any evolutionary junk code. It essentially has one tool merge, and it uses that tool to build infinite complexity.
It's almost humbling. We think of language as this cultural, messy, evolving thing, and it is on the surface. But deep down in the biological machinery, it's just math. It's this crystalline, efficient engine.
It suggests that the language faculty isn't a kludge of different evolutionary accidents stuck together with duct tape. It's a specific, streamlined solution that nature came up with.
I want to leave the listener with one thought that really struck me from the end of the text. It mentions that at its core, merge just creates a set of two things, 7 do lever. That's it.
The simplest possible mathematical object.
A pair. Right. And it made me think. Everything we've ever said, every I have a dream speech, every declaration of war, every wedding vow, every joke, is it all just our brains doing this one simple trick?
Yeah.
Making a list of two things over and over again at lightning speed.
It's a profound thought. It suggests that the infinite complexity of human culture is built on the simplest possible foundation. Just simple pairs all the way down.
Something to think about the next time you're diagramming a sentence or just ordering a coffee. That does it for this deep dive into the architecture of syntax. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.